Mae'n anrhydedd cael Gareth Evans Jones sydd yn fi yn ddod yn ffrind i'r gadeiron fel yn gwestiwn i hyn yma. It's very good to have Gareth Evans Jones as our guest at Clas this evening. Drawing up a little note of achievements to introduce Gareth to us this evening, reminded me of being 15 or 16, a kind of painful age when it was Blue Peter when I was little, where there were all these kind of, it was the age when the youngest person to do something was becoming slightly younger than you. So this annoyingly talented tennis player who had done something astonishing at the age of 14, and you could just see a life of disappointment extending ahead of you. I'm drawing up a list of Gareth's achievements to date to introduce him to you. Had that same kind of an effect on me. He's a lecturer in religious studies here at the university in Bangor, and we'll talk a bit about his academic career and interests in a moment. But he's also a novelist, having published to acclaim Mae'r Dr in 2018. He's also a winner twice in 2019 and 2021 of the Drama medal, the highest drama award within the National Eisteddfod of Wales. And his 2019 play was produced by the National Theatre of Wales. His newest play, Ynys Alice, is touring with the Fedal Theatre Company this spring, and his next new book is to be published in July, called Cylch Cymru, his writing inspired by walks and places around Wales. And on top of all of that, he's the founder and convener of Llyfrau Lliwgar, colourful books, the LGBTQ plus book club that meets monthly in Bangor. Gareth, croeso cynnes I ti, Gareth, a very warm welcome to this. He's also, I should say, a former preacher at the 9:15 service in the cathedral, and a former guest at Cylch. Gareth, I want to cover a few bases this evening, but let's start with the academic work. Give us a quick overview of your academic career to date, and let's land, if we can, with the subject of your doctoral thesis published in our school. So welcome, and introduce yourself through the means of your academic career, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, well, well, good evening, everyone. Noswaith dda bawb. Thank you for that introduction, Sean. Yeah, it's a lot of it's just down to potluck, really. So there's nothing major behind those. But yeah, so my academic career, I came to Bangor in 2009 to study a joint honours degree in religious studies and Welsh, and then I went on to do a master's in creative writing, just something completely different, and then did a PhD on a very, how can you say, a very interdisciplinary topic, which looked at the Christian responses of the Welsh in America to the issue of slavery between 1838 and 1868. And the topic of religion and slavery has been one of the most, I think, one of the most forward of topics that I'm actually researching and still researching at the moment. And yeah, so, and funnily enough, that the thesis, an adaptation of it, will be published next month as well. So I'm in the process now, in the very, how can I say, blissfully painful process of going through the proofs at the moment, thinking, is it too late to rewrite the whole thing? But no, hopefully the last proof will be sent over end of this week, so that will be ready for next month. so yeah, so obviously the ethical issue of slavery and religion, and the interaction between both, is where my main interest lies. And with my teaching, I do teach mainly on Christianity and Judaism and ethics and a bit of philosophy as well. So yeah, a jack of all trades, master of none, I think.
I'm conscious there's quite a bit of work happening at the moment. I'm thinking of some of Simon Brooks's writings as well about the Welsh diaspora and his focus on Liverpool and London to an extent as being Welsh cities in the 19th century and the 20th century, and similarly, I don't think we appreciate quite the nature and the depth of the Welsh diaspora in the United States. Can you tell us a bit about what that looked like in the 19th century? What the Welsh in the United States were?
Yes, yeah, by all means. I'll try not to ramble on too much about this, but anyway, yeah. So many Welsh migrants settled in North America, and maybe it's a tendency to think about the Welsh in America, to think about Patagonia, which rightfully so, it is one of the most well-known and most significant of Welsh, Welsh establishments in America. But thinking about the Welsh in North America, they settled in different communities all across North America, and among one of the first things that a community of Welsh migrants did after they arrived in a particular district or city or town was starting up a fund in order to build a place of worship. So obviously religion was, well, Christianity was so central to their thought. Many were non-conformist, Methodists, Baptists, Congregationalists, but there were some Anglicans also who went over to North America. And what's even fantastic is that the actual community, the diasporic community of the Welsh migrants in North America was so fruitful that there existed not just one or two or three, but around about 65 Welsh language journals, newspapers and magazines circulating in North America. And well, the publication of these journals, magazines and newspapers was so significant because it was a way of creating what's called an imagined community. So where someone from the north of New York and maybe someone from the south of Tennessee could read the same article and know that someone else was reading that article as well, and gaining a sense of a wider diasporic community in a way. So yeah.
And in terms of the response of that community to the subject of 19th centuries of slavery in the 19th century in the United States, I'm assuming quite a bit of that is about how you read the Bible and apply Christian ethics drawn from scriptural sources into the analysis of daily life. Can you say a bit more about how that worked out in terms of that community and its engagements with that issue of slavery, and how what lessons or insights you draw from that to how we think about society and our use of the Bible and sources of authority today?
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that question. Yeah. So they did. They were so familiar with their Bibles. They'd read the Bibles often, and well, they'd attend seiadau, discussion meetings based on the Bible itself. And obviously, biblical interpretation is such a fruitful vein, really, of scholarship. And what's even fascinating is that, yes, they did depend on the Bible. They did refer to biblical passages stating slavery is abhorrent, or slavery is unjust, or slavery is unchristian, by reference to, for example, the passage of Leviticus chapter 25 with the year of the Jubilee, for example, or passages to the Golden Rule, etc. These how can you say, humanitarian, or these positively driven teachings and passages. However, as we all know, the Bible does discuss some things that may seem to be counter to our expectancy, and that's being slavery. In particular, in, for example, the book of Exodus, it states how one must treat a slave, the Hebrew being eved, and obviously that has been debated whether eved should be interpreted as slave or servant, and obviously the different terms have different connotations. So during the period I was looking at in particular, the vast majority of articles that were published in the different periodicals and newspapers and magazines were anti-slavery in their argument, really, and they'd refer to certain passages to emphasize how sinful slavery actually was. However, there's always a however. There was one author I came across who wrote using a pseudonym, a pen name, called Tudur, and we've no idea who Tudur was. I haven't been able to find out, but it's still a lifelong goal of mine, I think, hopefully, to find out who Tudur actually was. And Tudur stated, well, you cannot say the Bible condemns slavery because you have X, Y, and Z passages stating slavery is acceptable. And therefore, slavery in the 19th century is equally acceptable. Now, as you'd imagine, that did rile up some feathers, and many writers did respond, one of them being the fantastic name Eos Glan Twrch, who was originally from Bala, and he wrote a scathing response to Tudur's commentary and stated, no, you cannot say the Bible condones slavery. If anything, it condemns slavery. Look at the Golden Rule, look at the humanitarian teachings of Jesus, etc. And I think what that just shows is, on the one hand, how fruitful biblical interpretation can be, that people can interpret the same text in different ways. But I think also for today, for our use of the Bible, it just emphasizes the need to be aware of the conflicting interpretations, the possible conflicting interpretations of the same text, or indeed of the same volume of books, really.
Well, as the partner of somebody who published their doctoral monograph a couple of years ago, I can feel your pain at the moment, going through those old footnotes to check that they're exactly as they should be, and thinking how much you can change at this stage. So I'm hoping that publication process goes well over the next few months. I suppose that in my head, that kind of academic publication and writing process feels quite different to what I imagine the creative process that lies behind writing a novel or writing a play is. And that's in part because I know a little bit about how to do that academic stuff. I don't know how creative writers work, and I'm imagining all sorts of exotic things that go into that don't go into study in the library and cards and notes that produce an academic chapter. Tell us a bit about your creative writing process. How does a play start, and how does it become the finished product for you?
Well, that's a good question. That's a big question, really. Where does it start? It can depend. Ideas come from everywhere, really, and the truth is there are so many ideas there. Yeah, there's not enough hours in the day really to be able to go after all the different ideas. They can come from, obviously, personal experience is a major source of ideas, but with certain pieces of writing, it again depends on the idea. Sometimes there is a need to do research. So in a way, there is that overlap with academic writing, with more research-based writing. For example, the play, the recent play I was part of the creative team with Fran Wen, Ynys Alice, the island of Alice. That, well, initially was ignited by the company. It was their idea, but I was able to take it on my own, in my own direction, and I had to do some research into Welsh history, for example. But with Eisteddfod Crefyddol, the book, the novel I published in 2018, because that was linked to the Holocaust, really, even though it was a creative piece, I still had to do research, and obviously that did feed into my academic interest anyway. So it was handy. I was able to do both together. And with this new book coming out next month, Cylchu Cymru, Circling Wales, that, if anything, all the ideas, most of them were spurred on just by being in the places and seeing the different places, seeing a beach or a monument or a landmark. But some of those pieces were inspired by a little research into the different places. So I think what I'm trying to hint at there is I like research, and I like to read, and I like to hear what other people have said and have written as well, and just respond that way. And I think as well with the Welsh Eisteddfodau culture, what's handy with different competitions and also in other regards, they like to put a subject or a topic as the starting place to be able to ignite the creative juices in a way. But interestingly enough, with the plays for the National Eisteddfod, both times, the only guidelines the competition had was a play for the stage and with no more than 4 characters within it. So obviously that sets the confines in a way. But I think what's fantastic is whenever you get confined, you always look to the beyond and to see what you can do in the middle of those confined elements, if that makes sense at all. I've rambled a bit. Sorry.
No. I'm wondering about the finished product in terms of novels and plays. Obviously with a novel, there's the text and it goes out there and people make of it what they will. But with a play, and perhaps especially with the Fran Wen play, where there's the engagement of people with it to produce it, to stage it, and you as the playwright get to see the fruit of your creativity and played out in front of you, and you get to engage with it. It feels a little bit like Christian worship and liturgy to an extent. It's not just a text. It's something that's performed and it's enacted, and you engage with it. What's that like for you as a playwright to see something that you've I was going to say given birth to, quite glibly. I'm hoping it's a less painful process than that. But something that you've produced, given into somebody else's hands, and then you get to see something of the fruits of your creativity, kind of in this enriching but perhaps challenging form in front of you. What's that like, emotionally and intellectually?
Yeah, that's a good question. obviously I have no experience of childbirth. However, it can be quite painful, but like childbirth, it's severely painful, but also such a nice feeling also. So I don't know, the process of writing can be can be challenging, to say the least. There are times when you're just overcome and lost in the work, but I don't know. It's always interesting to hear someone else reading what you've heard in your head, in a way, because until that point, it's only existed within your mind, and you've imagined how the characters talk. You've heard them talk and bicker with one another. So when you're driving or something, one of the characters might pop into your mind and with a specific line, and then and then hearing actors actually portraying the characters is such a surreal experience, but it's such a nice experience also, because that's why I think people write plays in particular in order to hear the characters, in order to hear the words being spoken. And funnily enough, the play, last year I was shameless enough to compete for the drama medal again in the Eisteddfod. The play is going to be, there's going to be a reading of it in the Eisteddfod this year. And next week, oh no, I'm lying, this Wednesday, I'll be going down to Carmarthen to the National Theatre for a workshop on the play on Thursday, where there'll be 2 actors there reading the play again. And there's a part of me that's excited, but also I'm so nervous as well. I don't know, it's just, I do battle with my nerves quite often. As you can maybe tell, I'm a bit of a jittery character at times. Maybe it's not as obvious maybe through Zoom. Hopefully that's one of the benefits of technology. But it'll be interesting there. But again, it's a very surreal, but it's also a very useful experience also, because sometimes once you hear someone else reading something you've written, sometimes you can hear it just sounding completely awful, and that's the worst thing that you've ever written, so you can scrap that out before it actually arrives at the stage, the actual stage of the stage, if that makes sense.
Well, I hope that goes well on Wednesday, and hopefully you look forward to hearing it at the Eisteddfod. You mentioned your newest book in passing, but tell us a bit more about it. So it's called Cylchu Cymru. So encircling Wales, or encompassing Wales to an extent. It sounds like a very interesting project, and I think that at a time when pilgrimage is quite zeitgeisty within and without the church, I think there are some interesting things there. So tell us about the project, how it started and what it's ended up looking like.
Yeah. So it started in the initial idea was created in 2018, really. When I was extremely fortunate to be part of the Writers at Work scheme at the Hay Festival in Hay on Wye, and obviously the Hay Festival has recently been, a couple of weeks ago, and it is a literary festival, and it's the Writers at Work scheme was a scheme run by Literature Wales. There were 10 of us who were given a place on the scheme, 10 of us being Welsh writers, either from Wales or based in Wales. And during that time, we spent 10 days together, so we got to know one another quite well. And there was one writer called Alison Powell, who's a fantastic writer. She hasn't published a lot. She hasn't published a standalone volume as of yet, but she will, and her work is phenomenal. And funnily enough, Alison writes flash fiction. So flash fiction, for anybody who doesn't know, is in essence a short story. So usually flash fiction pieces can range from 1 word to about 600 words per piece. So they have to be very short, they have to be very concise, and they have to, every word has to earn its place. And obviously, and I write llen beicro, which is Welsh for flash fiction a lot. And then obviously we got talking, and we came up with this idea of walking around Wales along the coastal path and along the Offa's Dyke, and responding through flash fiction to these different places. Funnily enough, Sean, you refer to pilgrimage in a way. Well, Alison is quite a spiritual person, in particular more Eastern religions, and obviously me with my interest in Judaism, Christianity, I have an interest in pilgrimage also. So we did see this as a sense of an identity pilgrimage in a way, and what Wales means to both of us. Me being a Welsh speaker, Alison being an English speaker, and me writing in Welsh and Alison writing in English. So that was the idea. So it was formed in 2018. Then we started contacting different publishers to ask whether they would support this bilingual publication. And unfortunately, many responded to say they weren't too keen on the bilingual elements. And then that's what it was. Then the idea sort of, it lulled a little bit afterwards. And then we had another meeting, and then Alison said, well, at the moment, her energy was actually invested in her novel, and she felt that she didn't necessarily have the time or the energy at the time to be able to continue with the idea, but that I would be able to carry on if I wanted to. So I felt I felt that I did want to carry on because I loved the idea, and also I wanted to do it for Alison in a way because of or in homage to her fantastic writing. And I'm so happy to say that there is a piece Alison's written specifically for the volume that's going to be published at in the beginning of the book. So she's still there in a sense. And then afterwards, over the following years, I walked around Wales at different periods, and obviously COVID happened, so that put a kibosh on things at different periods. But I did enjoy going all the way around Wales along the coastal path and Offa's Dyke, and responding creatively to these different places, and responding either to a piece of history about the place, or a piece of mythology about the place, or just something unique about a particular location. And the pieces they're varied in tone and content. Some are borderline poetry, so they're straddling the fine line between prose and poetry. Even though I'm not clever enough to be a poet, I hasten to say, but that's interesting, I think. And funnily enough, I'm actually at the moment going through the proofs of that book today, last night, and I will be this evening. And again, it's interesting. Again, with flash fiction, with the how brief it needs to be, whether every word is deserving of its place, and whether there's enough of a story there without going into too much detail about the different stories. And I haven't been brief in that response, I'm afraid.
I'm looking forward to introducing the Archbishop to the idea of flash sermons. I think there's some mileage there. Talk a bit more about, well, let me ask it this way. Is there a spirituality to place for you? Would you use that language? Would you engage with that idea?
Definitely, I think, especially with some of the pieces I've written. For example, going to Dewi, St. David's, and being there was so, obviously that was the first time I ever went there. That was a couple of months ago. And obviously knowing about St. David's and the history and everything, but being there and hearing the river flowing in the same context as the crows chirping away, and seeing the cathedral itself so solemn, so quiet, so tranquil. There was, I wouldn't say it was a religious experience per se, but it was definitely spiritual in a way, and I did feel very soothed, I think, being there. So definitely I was, that place did have an impact on me. Another place which was interesting enough was Rhosyli Bay, down near Pembrokeshire, I think. Rhosyli Bay, it was late in the afternoon and it was sunset at the time, and Rhosyli Bay is there's a very long stretch of a beach there, and just seeing the sand with the golden sun setting, and that entwining with the golden sand, the brown, the white, the cream colours of the sand. There was something quite moving about that place in particular. So I do think there is a sense of spirituality to the place. And funnily enough, in the Eisteddfod this year, I will be giving a talk on the Bangor University stall. I'm not sure of the exact day yet, but discussing the sense of modern pilgrimage and a spirituality of places. So thank you for mentioning that, Sean, and the fact that certain places, even today, in a very, how can I say, energetic world where people are continually going, I think there's still an ability to find the spirituality of places in any place, really, and that's something quite powerful, I think.
I wonder what it was like doing that during COVID and amid lockdown. So, conversation with somebody at the cathedral over the weekend about how the quietness of things and the boiled downness of things during some of the lockdowns had meant that they had noticed much more in terms of creation, sounds, landscapes, vistas, and I think that suddenly echoed with me. I'm conscious that during, what ended up being kind of years, not just months, a much greater sense of the whole created order as being infused by God and goodness. What was it like engaging with that project that's quite kind of travel but location and based during a time when those things were difficult, but senses were also heightened in some way too?
Yes, definitely. I think the fact that you've hit the nail on the head there, senses were heightened, and well, where I live right by the seaside, and I always love going down to Traeth, during the winter months when it is quieter, when it isn't as busy, where there aren't as many tourists about. Although I do love it when the tourists are there because it brings an energy to the place. But there is something about being there when it's just quiet, and then being able to go to Traeth and to other places, say in March, April, and being so quiet, it was a strange sentiment, because it was supposed to be livelier, it was supposed to be busier, but it did enable me to appreciate the tranquility, to appreciate the harmony of the sea washing on the shore, listening to the wind in the distance, or the breeze, and I do think that, yes, having that forced silence upon us was definitely quite a poignant experience. And it is something, even though obviously COVID was such a horrendous time, and it's been a very challenging time with many losses and various other challenges, but I do think that there was something quite poignant about the period that in a way, hopefully another generation will not experience. But there was something quite powerful about the experience that we have all been able to have, and it will last, I think, and continue with us.
Thank you. And poignant is such a useful word there, isn't it? It captures it. I'm conscious that I'm kind of I can feel my grandmother's presence above my left shoulder, avoiding me from talking to you about LGBTQ stuff in a church context. So I'm going to ignore her, and I'm going to move forward. So the last target I wanted to touch on was you started this tremendous venture that I keep telling all of my London friends about, that I'm a member of what I'm assuming is the only Welsh language LGBTQ book club in the world. You started this venture in Bangor, this monthly book club that gathers people from across Northwest Wales to it. What was the motivation behind doing that?
Yeah, so it started off well from a conversation I had with a friend who is part of the LGBTQIA+ community, and stating that it would be nice if there was a stimulus that will bring people together who we might not know or anything, and it was just the idea, something to bring the community and other members of society together, really. And then I thought, well, what's fascinating is we live in a much more tolerant society. Obviously, things could be better. Things are not perfect by far, but we do live in a growingly more tolerant society. But in the northwest of Wales, in Gwynedd and Anglesey, there aren't many LGBTQIA+ themed things at all, really. So I thought, well, I've got an interest in literature, and it would be interesting to actually create a group, a club, whereby we focus on LGBTQ+ literature in Welsh and in English every other month, and gain an insight whereby we can get readers who are part of the LGBTQIA+, or who are not, who are heterosexual also, because we do have some members who aren't LGBTQ in the group, to bring them together in order to discuss this type of literature, because it is a type of literature which is a growing field in English, in other languages. It isn't as extensive in Welsh, and what we do have, we are discussing, but I am conscious in a few months we might not have any Welsh language pieces to actually discuss. And I think that the idea with that is to be a stimulus for writers from the community to actually engage with different themes and write in response to them. And that's why there has been an LGBTQIA+ Welsh Writers Network formed a couple of months ago with the aim of creating new pieces for us to be able to discuss as part of the book club or the reading group, because we do discuss other things, short stories or particular pieces of poetry, so maybe it should be a reading group rather than a book club. Yeah, so that's the idea. And at the moment, we do have members from all over North Wales, Northwest Wales, and hopefully there will be, well, there are, I can say, plans in motion to create another branch of Llyfrau Lliwgar, colourful books, in the southeast of Wales in the coming months. So that's hot off the press. So hopefully that'll be formed soon. But yeah, that's the book club.
I'm conscious that you're on the verge of becoming part of the Welsh establishment, the kind of crachach, my grandmother would call it, yeah, and that's and I suppose that for me that's always had two dimensions of it: a kind of a very progressive Cardiff S4C world, and then a largely non-conformist Eisteddfod world that has been quite conservative. And I suppose that we're more part of that here, and that's my Welsh-speaking Wales world more than anything else. And that's a world that hasn't engaged that much with LGBTQ+ issues. And that's begun to thaw over the last few years. And I wonder what your perspective is on that. How have you felt your place and the engagement of those issues in that world? How's that felt like for you, and how do you perceive it changing?
That's a very good point. Without doubt, yes, Cardiff, etc., could be deemed more progressive, or maybe more in a sense. But I do think more rural communities are developing, are growing with time. Things aren't perfect by far, but I do think that there is a sense of emphasis that needs to be placed on these issues, for example. And I have to commend the cathedral, for example. I see every day coming to work the pride flag hanging, well, actually gliding above the cathedral at the moment. So I think that shows that religious bodies are progressive. So I think that can be a source of inspiration. But I do think your points about the Eisteddfod in particular is interesting, because if anything, it could be said that the Eisteddfod has been rather, how can I say, stagnant at times, maybe, and a bit rather old-fashioned, some would say, conservative. But since 2017, I think, Eisteddfod Caerdydd, when the Cardiff Eisteddfod was held, which was held in the Bay, it was an open maes, an open field, and that was the first time the initiative Mas ar y Maes was held out on the field, whereby Welsh language LGBTQ+ themed events took place. And since then, Mas ar y Maes has become an integral part of the Eisteddfod, and I've seen the plan for this year's Eisteddfod, and there are so many events held. So I think that there are progressive elements definitely taking place. Thinking in the more literary circle, obviously I'm a bit obsessed with literature. We only have to think about someone like Prosser Rhys, for example, who won the crown in the Pontypool Eisteddfod at the beginning of the 20th century with a poem discussing well, senses and sensual romantic experience with women and men. So we see there an element of, you could say, progressiveness. And this year in the Urdd Eisteddfod, Ciaran Einon was awarded the chair for a poem discussing his experience being a young gay Welshman and his relationship with the Welsh language, and how accommodating and not accommodating the Welsh language actually is with regards to homosexuality in particular, but also the LGBTQ plus wider community also. So I do think things are progressing in a particular way, and I think there are miles to go again. But I do think, well, one of the main things we teach here in uni, I'm still in the office. That's what, if you can see the whiteboard behind me, it's not subliminal messaging. It's yeah, just a list of things I need to do. But one of the things we do teach here, and is quite prominent in different religions and philosophies, is inclusivity, is the inclusivity of different faiths, and also the tolerance of different faiths. And I think those aspects are being promoted, but there is still room to progress with those ideas.